Good afternoon, folks. Hope everybody is doing well today. This is going to be the first in my series of lessons pertaining to the digestive system. If you've not already done so and you're in one of my classes, you should go online and go on Blackboard, get my copy of the notes for this section, which will contain some important vocabulary and terminology to help you follow along with what's going on. Now, the human digestive system, obviously, is an essential component of every other system we have studied. All cells require nourishment, but you are what biologists call a heterotroph. Heterotroph, a heterotroph. It's H-E-T-E-R-O. Yeah, sorry, got lost in the spelling of the word. But you are a heterotroph, meaning an organism that relies on external food. Your cells need nourishment, but they are unable to obtain it for themselves. Therefore, we have a collection of organs and structures that fulfill that function on our behalf, which we refer to as the digestive system. Now, the human digestive system is responsible ultimately for converting our food into a usable form, delivering it to the bloodstream, and absorbing essential nutrients. Fundamentally, the digestive system has four basic functions. First and most obvious is ingestion, the intake of food and water in the first place, actually putting the nutrients and fluids we require into our body. That's the easy part. From there, we move on to step 2, digestion. Now, digestion can be broken down into two basic phases. Digestion is fundamentally the breakdown of the food you have consumed, and it has two basic components. First, we have physical or mechanical digestion. Physical or mechanical digestion is the physical breakdown of large food particles into smaller food molecules. The action of physical digestion begins in the mouth with the chewing of your food and the action of your teeth and tongue. It is concluded in the stomach, in which the small chunks of food that we swallow are further broken down by gastric juices, the various acid compounds present in the stomach. Then we have chemical digestion. Chemical digestion, sometimes called enzymatic digestion, is the use of enzymes to break down small food particles into individual monomers. That is, reducing our food particles down to their most basic organic subunits, the amino acids, monosaccharides, and fatty acids that make up the components of our food, which our cells can then utilize for whatever they need them for. Enzymatic digestion also begins in the mouth. Your saliva contains a number of different digestive enzymes, and it is largely concluded in the small intestines, which are actually, you may not realize, the chief digestive organ. All right, so ingestion, take in the food. Digestion, break that food down, first physically and then chemically, reducing it down to basic organic monomers. Thirdly, absorption. It's not good enough that we have broken down all this food. If it's just sloshing around in your digestive tract, it's not doing anybody any good. So absorption means the uptake of the things we have taken in, the actual act of soaking up the nutrients and organic molecules and water that you've put into your body and transmitting them to where they need to go via the bloodstream. Once they've been absorbed from the digestive tract, they can then be directed through circulation to every other cell in the body. And finally, last step of the digestive system and the last major function of it is elimination. That is the removal of non-digested material and of digestive waste products. Now, it should be understood that this is not the removal of all metabolic wastes, as you've seen previously in our discussion of the respiratory system. Carbon dioxide waste is released via the lungs. As you've seen in discussion of our urinary system, the various metabolites produced by your cells as a byproduct of their actions are going to be filtered out by the kidneys. This is the elimination of material that was either not digested in the first place or was a byproduct left behind from the physical and chemical action of digestion in the digestive tract itself. So, 4 basic steps: ingestion, digestion, absorption, elimination. Those are the 4 fundamental functions of the digestive tract. Now, let me give you a bit of terminology here. A term that you will probably not hear much in your anatomy textbooks, but it's one worth mentioning, is a term that comes from developmental biology, and that is the archenteron. A-R-C-H-E-N-T-E-R-O-N. The archenteron is the primitive gut. It's the basic primitive digestive tube that forms in all animals during the course of their embryonic developments. The archenteron is derived from the endoderm. If you think way back to histology in A and P1, and you think about how we talked about your primary germ layers, your basic embryonic tissues that all of us came from, that you remember your embryo sorted itself into ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm, those 3 cell layers that formed early in your developments. Your digestive tube, your archenteron, arises from the endoderm. So developmentally, that is where the entire digestive tract comes from. Now, there's some overlapping terminology here that should be sorted out. First off, the term digestive tract, T-R-A-C-T. Remember, a tract is a continuous tube. The digestive tract is a continuous tube with 2 openings to the external environment. The digestive tract begins at the mouth, terminates at the anus. It is also called the alimentary canal, A-L-I-M-E-N-T-A-R-Y. The alimentary canal, that term means the same thing as the digestive tract. You can use those terms synonymously. They both refer to the continuous tube from mouth to anus in which all digestive activity takes place. Let's not confuse the digestive tract with the gastrointestinal tract, or the GI tract, as you might have heard it called. The GI tract is not the entire alimentary canal. The GI tract is often used synonymously with digestive tract, but it actually refers to a specific portion of the digestive tract, namely the stomach and the intestines. Gastro for stomach, intestinal. Gastrointestinal, stomach and intestines. That portion of the digestive tract is the GI tract. Now you might be thinking, well, that's most of it, right? Yeah, you're correct. That is most of it. But there are other components to the GI tract. Everything between mouth and stomach is part of the GI tract. I'm not part of the GI, part of the digestive tract, my bad. So yes, the GI tract makes up most of the digestive tract, but keep in mind that the portions from mouth to stomach, everything in that zone, are not part of the GI tract. That's the stuff that comes before the GI tract. Likewise, following the intestines, structures like the rectum and the anus are not, strictly speaking, part of the GI tract either, although they're often lumped together with it for organizational purposes. Let's also not use the terms digestive tract and digestive system synonymously. The digestive tract is that tube that I mentioned, that continuous tube that passes through a number of organs along the way. Components of that tube are going to enlarge into various organs like the stomach and the small intestines and the colon and so forth. But not every part of the digestive system is part of the digestive tract. There are a number of important accessory organs that are involved in the digestive system that are not, strictly speaking, part of that alimentary canal. They're accessory structures that are assisting with digestion in other ways. So, kind of laying out our pathway here. Let's sort of map out our digestive system. Let's start with the alimentary canal itself, the digestive tract. Structures involved there. Digestive tract begins at the mouth, proximal opening. From there, we move to the oral cavity, the space posterior to the mouth. From there, we move into a structure you already know, the oropharynx, O-R-O-P-H-A-R-Y-N-X. Remember, that's the portion of the pharynx used for both air and food. From there, we move into the laryngopharynx, L-A-R-Y-N-G-O-P-H-A-R-Y-N-X. because that's one of those words that just hates you and does not want you to know how to spell it. But the laryngopharynx extends from the oropharynx down to the esophagus, ESOPHAGUS. The esophagus is the food tube that connects the throat to the stomach. From esophagus, we move to the stomach, STOMACH. From the stomach, we go to the small intestines, INSTENINES, intestines. From there, we go to the large intestines. And then from the large intestines to the rectum, RECTUM. And finally, the distal opening of the digestive tract, the anus, ANUS. So that's all the structures that are part of the digestive tract. You might have noticed I did not mention the colon in there. A lot of folks get confused about this. The colon is a portion of the large intestine. The large intestine has a couple of different parts. The colon is the largest part of it, but it's only a portion of that overall structure. Now, in addition to those parts that belong to the digestive tract, we have a number of accessory organs that assist with the intake, breakdown, and absorption and elimination functions. Accessory organs of the digestive system, part of the digestive system, not part of the tract, include the lips, the teeth, the tongue, TONGUE. A lot of people misspell that. The salivary glands, SALIVARY. The pancreas, PANCREAS. The liver. And we can also kind of tack it on here, although it's not strictly speaking a digestive structure. Let's add on the appendix, APPENDIX. As I've discussed with you previously, the appendix more properly should be classified as part of the lymphatic system, since we have learned that contrary to popular belief, it is not a vestigial organ. It actually does have an active lymphatic function. Nonetheless, it is attached directly to the colon. It is traditionally associated with the digestive tract, and this is where most anatomy textbooks list it, and that's where we're going to discuss it. So I'm going to discuss the appendix as an accessory organ of the digestive system, but I want you all to keep in mind that it is, strictly speaking, not a digestive organ. Likewise, I missed one here. Extending from the liver is a small sac-like organ called the gallbladder. GALLBLADDER. And the gallbladder is an extension of the liver, but it is part of the digestive system as a whole. So that is our basic pathway of the digestive system. That is the scope of structures that we're going to be discussing as we get through it. Lots to talk about here. I think the easiest way to approach the digestive system is to go through it kind of in order, start at the mouth, end at the anus, and talk one by one about the parts that we find along the way and the things that they do. Now, before we do that, a little bit of histology for you here. We're looking at the digestive tract itself. Nearly all parts of the digestive tract have 4 distinct tissue layers called the tunics, TUNIC. Now, going from the innermost to the outermost, that is the deepest to the most superficial. The innermost tunic of the digestive tract is the mucosa, MUCOSA. As you could probably guess, that is going to consist primarily of an epithelial mucous membrane. And remember, mucous membrane is MUCOUS. MUCOUS is the adjective describing the membrane. MUCUS is the sticky fluid that it secretes. So we have a mucous membrane formed from epithelial tissue, primarily simple columnar epithelium in the stomach, and a couple of other kinds throughout the rest of the tract. The mucosa also includes a little bit of connective tissue called the lamina propria. lamina, Lamina, propria, Propria, Propria. And finally, part of the mucosa is the muscularis mucosa, Muscularis, the muscularis mucosa. The mucosa serves to both absorb nutrients and secretes digestive enzymes. It also is highly resistant to both abrasion and to chemical breakdown from the acids of the GI tract. So that's the mucosa. That is the deepest layer of the digestive system's wall, the deepest tunic. It's the part that is open directly to the inside of the digestive tract. A term you're going to hear me use from time to time here that you might remember from other phases of this course is the term lumen, Lumen. A lumen is the space inside of a hollow structure. So the space inside the stomach is its lumen, the space inside the small intestines is the lumen, space inside a blood vessel is the lumen. All right, continuing our way out, immediately superficial to the mucosa, we find the submucosa, Submucosa. The submucosa is a thick layer of loose connective tissue, primarily areolar tissue. The submucosa anchors the mucosa, contains lots of nerves, contains lots of blood vessels, provides the blood supply to the mucosa, and contains numerous small glands, which secrete many of our digestive fluids. Continuing superficially, the next tunic out is the muscularis, not to be confused with the muscularis mucosa, Muscularis. The muscularis consists of two distinct layers of smooth muscle. Tucked between them is a bundle of nerve fibers called the myenteric plexus, Myenteric plexus, Plexus. The muscularis controls the motility of the digestive tract, Motility, and motility means movement of, or ability of the digestive tract to move. And finally, the outermost layer of the digestive tract is called the serosa, Serosa, or the adventitia, Adventitia. Now, those are not actually synonymous terms. Those mean something slightly different. Both of them are a connective tissue layer that covers the digestive tract as a whole. We call it a serosa if it is a connective tissue layer underlying the peritoneum. We call it the adventitia if it is a connective tissue layer in regions of the digestive tract that are not covered by the peritoneum. We'll talk more about the peritoneum if you don't remember that term in just a few moments. Now, throughout the entirety of the walls of the digestive tract, you're going to find an extensive network of nerves and nerve plexi called the enteric nervous system, Enteric, the enteric nervous system, sometimes abbreviated the ENS. The enteric nervous system, or ENS, controls most digestive activity through local reflexes. That is, it does not require the action of the brain to tell it what to do. The enteric nervous system is largely disconnected from the central nervous system. Your brain can send messages. Your brain can step in and say, okay, here are things that need to happen. But for the most part, the digestive tract is self-regulating. The enteric nervous system is largely independent of the brain and spinal cord and pretty much handles its own affairs separate from the central nervous system. In fact, some anatomists have gone so far as to call the enteric nervous system an entirely separate bodily system, independent of the rest of your nervous system. It actually contains approximately 50% of all the neurons in your body. So it's a very, very active system that pretty much does its own thing. It can be overridden by signals from the central nervous system. The vagus nerve in particular, VAGUS, remember good old cranial nerve 10, can step in and influence what the ENS is doing. But for the most part, the ENS is controlling digestive action all on its own. You can be clinically brain dead, and your digestive tract will still operate just fine. All right, so that's the basic tissue structure of the digestive tract. We got a 4-layer wall, with the innermost layer being the epithelial mucosa, anchored by a connective tissue, areolar tissue submucosa. Then we will find the muscularis layer that is made of smooth muscle and provides motility. And finally, we will find the serosa or the adventitia as the connective tissue covering of the entire digestive system. Now, a few minutes ago, I mentioned that we call that connective tissue outermost layer the serosa in those regions where the digestive tract is covered by the peritoneum, and we call it the adventitia in regions where it is not. So let's talk about this very important membrane. Let's talk for a minute about the peritoneum. P-E-R-I-T-O-N-E-U-M, not I-U-M. Peritoneum. You might remember the peritoneum from way back in A&P1, back when we talked about body cavities and membranes in the first place. Now, the peritoneum is a serous membrane. Remember, serous membranes, S-E-R-O-U-S, are those membranes that secrete lubricating fluids. The peritoneum lines the inner body walls and covers most of the abdominopelvic organs. It's highly lubricated by serous fluids in order to reduce friction between organs as they slide around a little bit within your body cavities as you move. Now, the peritoneum has two basic components. We have the parietal peritoneum, P-A-R-I-E-T-A-L. The parietal peritoneum lines the inner surface of your body walls. In other words, it lines the inner walls of your body cavities. The visceral peritoneum, V-I-S-C-E-R-A-L, covers organs, not only digestive, but several other organs as well. The space between those two portions of the peritoneum is called the peritoneal cavity. It's a largely fluid-filled space. Now, many of your digestive organs are supported within your body by an additional set of membranes called the mesenteries. M-E-S-E-N-T-E-R-I-E-S. Oh, a mesentery with a Y at the end if you're talking about one of them. The mesenteries are another group of the membranes. They are sheets of connective tissue which serve to suspend and support your various abdominopelvic organs, preventing them from just falling down into the base of the pelvic basin. You got 3 different mesenteries. You have a mesentery called the mesentery proper. The mesentery proper supports the small intestine. You have a mesentery called the lesser omentum, O-M-E-N-T-U-M. The lesser omentum connects the liver and the diaphragm to the stomach. And finally, we have the greater omentum. The greater omentum binds the stomach to the transverse colon, the portion of the colon that runs horizontally across the abdominal cavity. And that's T-R-A-N-V-E-R-S-E, transverse, colon, C-O-L-O-N. The greater omentum has a long double fold that folds down over the abdominal cavity. We call that large double fold the omental bursa, B-U-R-S-A. A bursa is a sac. So we've got basically the greater omentum folds down over the front of the abdominal cavity and then kind of folds back up. And we've got this pocket within it. That omental bursa is filled up with adipose tissue. It's one of the primary sites of fat storage in your body. and it forms what we sometimes call the somewhat gross term, the fatty apron that covers the abdomen. Whenever you accumulate more fatty tissue, that's mostly where it is going in the abdominal region. Now, all of the organs that are bound by mesenteries are considered peritoneal organs. They are covered by the peritoneum. But there are other organs in the abdominopelvic cavity that are not covered by the peritoneum. We say that those organs are retroperitoneal. 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 Prefix retro means behind. So a retroperitoneal organ is located behind the peritoneum. We would say that it is up close against the body wall. It's pressed up against the inner abdominal wall. Now, most of your abdominopelvic organs are peritoneal organs. They are covered by the peritoneum. Assume that any organ in the abdominopelvic cavity, everything from the diaphragm down to the pelvic bones, is covered by the peritoneum unless otherwise stated. What structures are retroperitoneal? Things that are retroperitoneal include the pancreas, the duodenum, D-U-O-D-E-N-U-M. The duodenum is the most proximal portion of the small intestine. The rest of the small intestine is peritoneal. The ascending and descending portions of the colon, the regions of the colon that go up one side of the abdominal cavity and down the other side. Those portions are considered retroperitoneal. The transverse colon is peritoneal. The kidneys are retroperitoneal. You might remember that from our discussion of the urinary system. The adrenal glands that sit on top of them are retroperitoneal. The urinary bladder is retroperitoneal, and the rectum is retroperitoneal. All of the other abdominopelvic organs are covered by the peritoneum. I want to mention here a very important clinical detail about the peritoneum. At one time, soldiers would fear a gut wound worse than just about any other kind of injury. If you get shot back in the day before we had modern medicine, you get shot in the chest, you get shot in the lung, you get shot in the heart, odds are you're probably going to die pretty soon. But if you get shot in the abdomen, you're not going to necessarily die right away. You might if you bleed out. But even if you don't die right away, soldiers back in the day knew that if they got shot or stabbed in the guts, they were probably going to die a very painful death a couple of days later. The reason for that is because whenever you puncture the abdomen, you run the very real danger of bacteria getting into the abdominal cavity and colonizing the peritoneum. This is especially the case if the colon itself is punctured. Recall that our colon, or you probably know this already, if you don't know it already, we're going to talk about it soon, that your colon contains a large number of bacteria. There are numerous bacteria that are indigenous to the human digestive tract that live in our large intestines and help us with certain aspects of digestion. Those bacteria are perfectly fine and safe for you as long as they stay inside of the large intestine. But if the large intestine gets punctured, they can escape and move out into the abdominal cavity. They can colonize that moist serous peritoneum and grow there, and you can end up with a very dangerous and painful abdominal infection called peritonitis. Peritonitis. Peritonitis is inflammation and infection of the peritoneum. It is sometimes a complication of abdominal surgery. It can also be a complication of any kind of abdominal injury that punctures the abdominal cavity, particularly those that puncture the large intestine. It can also be the result of a burst appendix, which allows bacteria from the large intestine to get into the abdominal cavity as well. Peritonitis is a very serious condition. At one time, if you got peritonitis in the pre-antibiotic era, you were basically going to die a really painful death from it fairly quickly. But in the modern era, honestly, peritonitis is still a dangerous post-surgical complication. People still die of peritonitis, although these days rapid courses of antibiotics can usually bring it under control. But whenever you're doing abdominal surgery or treating a patient with abdominal injuries, this is a thing you must be very mindful of as a possible complication. And it's one reason why just about everybody who has abdominal surgery or an abdominal injury is going to receive prophylactic antibiotics afterwards, even before there's an obvious sign of infection. All right, so that kind of lays out our digestive tract. That lays out the pathway that we're following here, the accessory organs, and the various membranes that suspend them in place and bind it all together. So now let's begin the story of the digestive tract itself. Let's start working our way through this passageway from beginning to end. So we'll begin at the proximal end of the digestive tract, the mouth. All right, so let's talk about the mouth or oral cavity. Now, technically the mouth and oral cavity are not the same thing. The mouth is the opening, the proximal opening to the digestive tract. The oral cavity is the space posterior to it. But a lot of times you're going to see those words used synonymously, and we're basically going to discuss them together. Now, the oral cavity is bounded anteriorly by the lips, bounded superiorly by the palate, P-A-L-A-T-E, bounded laterally by the cheeks, and bounded inferiorly by a muscular wall at the base of the jaw. At the posterior end of the oral cavity, there's no boundary. There's an opening instead. That opening is called the fauces, F-A-U-C-E-S. The fauces is the connection between the oral cavity and the oropharynx. Technically, the oral cavity is divided into two components. There is the vestibule, V-E-S-T-I-B-U-L-E. That's a word you'll hear a couple different times in anatomy in different contexts. The word vestibule means a front chamber or an opening chamber. If you're talking about, a church, the vestibule is the first space you come into at the beginning, or whenever you come into the lobby of a building, the vestibule is technically the first part you go into. The vestibule of the oral cavity is the space between your lungs and your teeth. That little space right over in here, that's the vestibule. That's the vestibule. The space behind the teeth, posterior to the teeth, is the oral cavity proper. Now, surrounding the mouth, surrounding the opening, we have the lips, which are technically called the labia, L-A-B-I-A. That word labia, simply Greek for lip. It's used in two contexts in anatomy. We use it to refer to the fleshy tissue surrounding the oral cavity, as well as the fleshy tissue surrounding the opening to the vaginal canal. It's usually pretty context obvious which one you're referring to. Now, the lips are muscular structures formed primarily by a muscle you might remember called the orbicularis oris, O-R-B-I-C-U-L-A-R-I-S, oris, O-R-I-S. The orbicularis oris is the ring of muscle surrounding the mouth. The lips are primarily made up from that muscle and a layer of connective tissue. The skin over the lips is very thin, and they are highly vascularized. That combination of features is responsible for their pink to reddish color. Now, the lips are attached to the skeleton. They're bound to the alveolar processes. Think about that term for a moment, the alveolar processes. Think back to your skeletal system. The alveolar processes are the portions of the skull that hold the teeth. So the alveolar processes right here, about there in your skull, are the part of the maxillary bones where the teeth are anchored. And you also have the alveolar process of the mandible, where the lower teeth are anchored. Your lips are attached to the alveolar processes by a thin little band of tissue called the labial frenulum, F-R-E-N-U-L-U-M. If you were talking about both of them together, they are the labial frenulae, A-E at the end. And you can feel them yourself. Stick your tongue right up over your incisors, right up over your big front teeth, and feel around up above your teeth, at the underside of your upper lip. you'll feel a thin little band of tissue up there, kind of moving vertically oriented, that your tongue will be pressing against it. That is the upper labial frenulum. If you do the same thing, fold your tongue down in front of your lower incisors, you'll feel right around down here a similar little band of tissue that is the lower labial frenulum. Those are just thin bands of connective tissue that bind the lips in place. The lips have a couple of important functions when it comes to the processing of food. They help to grip onto the food and hold it in place while you're taking it in. The lips serve to close the oral cavity so that food and drink do not escape. And for a feeding infant, the lips are vital for latching onto and sucking milk from a nipple. Now, other boundaries of the oral cavity, let's talk about the cheeks right here, your cheeks. The cheeks are the fleshy coverings of the lateral sides of your face. The cheeks are primarily made up from muscles called the buccinators, B-U-C-C-I-N-A-T-O-R-S, the buccinators. They are also going to be made round and full by the so-called buccal fat pads, B-U-C-C-A-L. The word buccal, or buccal in some pronunciations, refers to anything around the region of the cheeks. The buccal fat pads make your cheeks rounder and fuller. They are typically fuller in women than in men. One of the effects of the hormone estrogen is that the female body stores a larger amount of subcutaneous fat than the male body, given the same diet. And they're also going to be larger in children. You might have noticed kids have those cute little round chubby cheeks. That's because kids' bodies store a larger layer of subcutaneous fat as a way of helping to insulate against heat loss from their much smaller body. The cheeks, in many ways, serve the same function as the lips. They close off the oral cavity on either side, preventing food and drink from escaping. Together, the lips and teeth help to hold and manipulate food during chewing. They are also involved in a lot of facial expressions. Obviously, a lot of details of our facial expression are determined by the orientation of our lips and cheeks. And of course, they are involved in speech. Your lips and cheeks move extensively while you're speaking to help shape the sounds coming out of your mouth. So in that regard, they have a verbal function, an auditory function that has nothing to do with their digestive function as well. Speaking of organs that have both a speech and digestive function, let's talk for a minute about the rather remarkable organ known as the tongue. The tongue, T-O-N-G-U-E, is a large muscular organ, skeletal muscle. It is attached at the posterior portion of the oral cavity. Actually, further down than you think. The tongue is rooted only slightly above the epiglottis, down in the pharynx. The tongue is an interesting muscle in that it is the only skeletal muscle with a free end. It is anchored at its proximal end, but the distal end of the tongue is free to move around. In fact, the tongue has the highest degree of mobility of any muscle in your body, with the exception of the lingual frenulum, L-I-N-G-U-A-L. Anything lingual has to do with the tongue. The lingual frenulum is the band of tissue that anchors your tongue to the floor of your oral cavity. You can reach in your own mouth, kind of fold your tongue back and feel along the base of your tongue. You'll feel that little band of tissue. That is your lingual frenulum. Now, the tongue is highly mobile, and it needs to be for a lot of different purposes. The tongue has a feeding role. It is involved in licking, which is an action for taking in nutrients and minerals. The basic licking behavior of, licking sweet things off of your hands, you lick a little bit of ice cream or honey off your fingertips or whatever. That's a basic behavior that virtually all animals will do when they have nutrient-rich residues of their food on some part of their bodies. Also, a lot of animals in the wild will lick minerals in order to get salts from it. If you want to have deer in your yard putting out a salt lick, the deer will come and lick it to get the salts. You can see them doing that. But So licking behavior is an important function of the tongue. Speech is obviously an important function of the tongue. And the tongue has a number of roles in the digestive system. It serves to hold and move food around within the mouth during mastication. mastication. Mastication is one of those words that make 12-year-olds giggle. That is the technical term for chewing. So our tongues move food around in the mouth during mastication, shifting it from one set of teeth to another. We'll talk about why that would be important in a few moments. The tongue also serves to shape the food that we are chewing up into a soft mass called a bolus, B-O-L-U-S, which is easier to swallow. Furthermore, the tongue has another important role in the digestive system, namely in identifying what you're eating. The tongue, as you are all aware, is our body's primary organ of gustation, G-U-S-T-A-T-I-O-N, and if you don't remember that term from earlier phases of this course, gustation is the technical term for your sense of taste. Your tongue is the primary site of taste buds, which are the small organs that actually contain the taste receptor cells, which enable you to learn about the chemical content of your food. That's really what the sense of taste is. It's a chemoreceptive sense telling you about the chemical contents of your food. The tongue is not the only site of gustation. You actually have taste buds going down into your throat as well. The pharynx has a number of taste buds. Some of you might be aware of the sensation of tasting things in your throat, especially if you are about to get sick or have gotten sick. You'll be aware of that taste sensation down in your throat. But the tongue is the primary location of those taste buds. Tongue, some fun facts about it. It is the strongest muscle in the human body. Your tongue can exert more force per square inch than any other muscle in our bodies, except because it's not bound to bone except at the posterior end, it has very little mechanical advantage, and therefore is not really capable of exerting tremendous force that way. Furthermore, our tongue is the fastest healing tissue in the body. If the tongue is damaged, it recovers really quickly. If you get a burn on the surface of your tongue, you've all had the experience, you drink a hot drink too fast and the surface of your tongue gets burned, and for a day maybe things don't taste quite right, but it recovers pretty fast, doesn't it? If any of you who have ever had a tongue piercing, you're very, very well aware that if you take that thing out, that hole's going to close real quick, because our tongues are incredibly regenerative. They are the most highly regenerative muscle in the body, and they heal from injury very, very quickly. Even if the tongue is split down the middle, even if you have your tongue split, some people do that by way of body modification into two separate units, if left alone, they will come back together and heal. Now, I skipped over what might be the most important organs of the oral cavity, and that would be your teeth. And yes, I say organs. Each tooth is an individual organ. Let's not forget that an organ, by definition, is any structure consisting of more than one tissue type bound together for a common purpose. Now, we think of the teeth, and our tendency is to think of them as part of the skeletal system. You can see why. They're hard structures, they're mineralized, they are directly rooted in the skull. But in point of fact, your teeth are not bony structures at all. They are not part of the skeletal system. They are embryologically derived from the ectoderm. Embryologically, the teeth come from the same place as your skin. And in the history of evolution, teeth actually originated in the earliest fish-like animals in the oceans as armored enamel plates found on the head of that animal. If you happen to be in Pittsburgh and you go to the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, whenever you were allowed to go to museums again, in the gift shop of the museum, you will find the skull of a fish-like animal called Dunkleosteus. Basically, think a predatory fish the size of a school bus that lived in the oceans about 350 million years ago. And Dunkleosteus's entire head is plated in what we call dermal armor, means basically a layer of enamel found in the animal's skin to provide it with sort of a natural helmet. Over the course of evolutionary time, portions of the dermal armor migrated into the jaw, where they proved to be very useful for biting and chewing. And although the rest of the dermal armor has gone away over the course of evolutionary time, the teeth have remained. So technically, the teeth are a derivative of the integumentary system, but we consider them to be digestive organs because of their functions. Now, obviously, our teeth have a number of jobs. They play a role in speech and the shaping of your voice, just like your tongue and your lips do. Your teeth can serve as a crude tool. Let's be honest, all of us have bitten something with our teeth by way of holding it in place, or biting through it, or holding something in our teeth. So yeah, teeth can be used as a crude tool. In some prehistoric societies, people traditionally would chew leather to soften it, or they would chew other things to soften them for tool use purposes. And of course, your teeth can be a crude weapon of sorts. A human bite is no laughing matter. There's lots of bacteria in your mouth that'll get infected real quick. But of course, when we think of our teeth, our primary way of considering them is that the teeth are organs of mastication. The teeth are the organs involved in the first step of physical or mechanical digestion. Their job is to break apart the food in your mouth, reducing it from large food chunks that you have bitten off to smaller individual food particles. The effect of this is twofold. One, it makes it easier to swallow, to have it reduced into small pieces. And two, it makes it easier to digest. By breaking the food into lots of small chunks, you're increasing its overall surface area and exposing it more directly to digestive enzymes. In fact, that begins in the mouth because as you are chewing your food, as you are masticating, you are working digestive enzymes from your saliva into that food right there in the oral cavity. So chemical digestion begins as well, and although the teeth do not carry it out, they are increasing the overall surface area for those chemicals to work on, and they are physically helping to push those enzymes into the food as you chew. Now, teeth are really cool, and you can do an entire course on teeth. I mean, if you're a dentist, you do an entire career-building degree on teeth. But your teeth are really nifty, and I like teeth as an anthropologist and archaeologist. Those of you who don't already know this, I began my career in archaeology. I am primarily a paleoanthropologist by training, meaning that I'm focused on the evolution of humankind. And in human evolutionary science, we actually have more teeth of our ancestors than any other single thing. Way more teeth than bones have been preserved. And often, the teeth are the best preserved part of a fossil that we will find. Even for non-human animals, there are way more teeth preserved in the fossil record than anything else. The reason for this has to do with the structure of the tooth. If you're looking at a tooth, you will find that the tooth is rooted in the alveoli of our mouths. They are held in place by a tough ligaments, the periodontal ligaments, Periodontal. Anything that is dontal is having to do with teeth. So the periodontal ligament binds the tooth to the alveolar cavity, the little space within the jaw where it resides. The structure of the tooth is made of a living tissue called dentin. D-E-N-T-I-N. Dentin is an organic tissue, but it's one that accumulates large amounts of calcium minerals. The dentin layer of the tooth surrounds a soft inner core called the pulp, P-U-L-P. The pulp is the organic tissue of the teeth. It contains blood vessels that nourish the dentin. It also contains nerve endings. The pulp is quite sensitive. If you get a cavity or a broken tooth, injury to or contact with the pulp is very painful. Now, the crown of the tooth, the part that you see above the surface of the gum line, the crown of the tooth is covered in a substance known as enamel, E-N-A-M-E-L. Enamel is an inorganic material. It's hard, clear coating over the dentin. Enamel is the hardest substance produced by your body. It is far harder than bone. That provides the tooth with a strong and highly resistant surface for the breakdown of the things that you are chewing up. So you've got the crown of the tooth, which is the part visible above the surface, consists of a layer of enamel overlying the dentin. The dentin, in turn, encases the pulp of the tooth, which extends down below the gum line into the roots of the tooth. And depending on what kind of tooth you're dealing with, you will have either one or two roots, which bind it to the gum, anchored in place by the periodontal ligaments. The teeth, by the way, you may not realize this, are technically held in place by flexible joints. You don't think of it as a joint, but the periodontal ligament binding the tooth to your jaw is technically a joint. It's a special kind of joint called a gomphosis, G-O-M-P-H-O-S-I-S, one of my favorite words in all of biology, gomphoses, the joints of teeth. And your gomphoses are actually amphiarthroses. Think back to our study of joints back in A&P1. A-M-P-H-I-A-R-T-H-R-O-S-E-S. Amphiarthroses. Amphiarthroses are slightly movable joints. No, you can't sit there and make your teeth wiggle, but grab hold of them. You can make them wiggle around a little bit, right? They have to have a little bit of give. The gomphosis is a slightly movable joint to give the teeth a little bit of give so they do not crack when you bite down hard on things. And therefore, that little bit of flexibility makes them far more resistant to damage. In the same way that your skeleton has a slight amount of flexibility in bone to make it less likely to break. Now, our teeth are also interesting for another reason, not just because of their high durability, but because of what teeth can teach us about the diet of an animal. If you want to know what an animal's default dietary pattern is, look at its teeth. The teeth tell you a lot. The shape and type of teeth that you have dictates a great deal about what you eat, because different kinds of teeth are better for processing different kinds of food. You are not going to use exactly the same kind of bites for breaking down plant material as you are for slicing through meats. So if you look at an animal's teeth, you will find you can learn what kind of diet that animal has by default, because its dental formula is going to reveal what kind of food that animal is evolved and adapted to eat. Now, I said a term there, dental formula. And I'm just writing down something here to show you because it's easier to illustrate than it is to explain. Bear with me 1 second. All right, so when you talk about the dental formula of an animal, the dental formula is telling you about what kinds of teeth that animal has and how many of each kind of tooth that it has. When we discuss the dental formula, the way we typically frame it is we talk about one quadrant of the mouth. You can divide your mouth into two quadrants. We talk about what we call the dental arcade. The dental arcade is the row of teeth that you have, upper and lower. So you have an upper dental arcade and a lower dental arcade. The teeth are symmetrical left and right. In other words, you've got the same kinds of teeth on the left side of your mouth as you do on the right side of the mouth, top and bottom. So we could talk about each quadrant of the mouth in turn. Left upper, left lower, right upper, right lower. I got that backwards. Left, right. There we go. Because I'm looking at myself in my own camera. Now, the dental arcade, we count teeth in the dental formula going outward from the middle. So when I'm framing my dental formula, I'm going to write it as a row of numbers over another row of numbers. What I am telling you is what is in one quadrant of the upper jaw and what is in one quadrant of the lower jaw, counting teeth from the middle in the order in which they come. I'm just going to add a little something to my diagram here. Now, different species have different dental formulas, and not all animals have the same number and type of teeth in the upper jaw as in the lower jaw. But here, folks, for your edification, is the human dental formula. We have the same number of teeth in the upper and lower portions of our jaw. So that right there is the human dental formula. And you can see that it is 2, 1, 2, 3 over 2, 1, 2, 3. And I have drawn over here the dental arcade. You can see upper jaw, lower jaw, counting out from the middle, 2, 1, 2, 3 on each side of the mouth. And you see the same thing on the lower jaw down below, 2, 1, 2, 3, counting from the middle laterally. So that's the human dental formula. That is the default number of teeth in the adult human jaw in each quadrant. So this basically represents one quadrant of the upper jaw, one quadrant of the lower jaw. So 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3 in the other quadrants. Down here, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. Do the math on that. That means you have 8 teeth in each quadrant of your jaw, 16 teeth upper, 16 teeth lower, a grand total of 32 adult teeth. That is the default number of teeth in a human mouth. Non-metric variation is always possible. Humans are variable animals. It is exceedingly unusual to have more teeth than that, but once in a great while it does happen. It is slightly more common to have fewer teeth than that in one specific instance, which I'll talk about shortly. Now here's the thing. Those numbers are sorted out that way because not all of your teeth are the same. You actually have 4 distinct kinds of teeth. The 2, 1, 2, 3 refers to 2 incisors, incisors, 1 canine, canine, 2 premolars, premolars, and finally 3 molars, molars. We have 4 distinct types of teeth in the human mouth. Why do we have 4 different kinds of teeth? We have 4 different kinds of teeth because the default dietary strategy for a primate is to be an omnivore, omnivore. Omnivory is a dietary strategy in which the animal takes in both plant and animal foods as a routine and standard part of its diets. So if you're an omnivore, your body is adapted to eat both meat and vegetable material, and that your body requires nutrients and amino acids that are primarily found in both of those things. Primates, including humans, are by default omnivores. There are only 2 exceptions. There's a little tiny primate called the tarsier, which is an exclusive carnivore. They eat insects. And there's an animal called the colobus monkey. The colobus monkey is an exclusive herbivore. They're a leaf feeder. But for the most part, all other primates are going to be omnivores, meaning that they consume both plant and animal materials as a habitual part of their diets. Anybody who tells you vegetarianism is a more natural diet for a human has not paid a lot of attention to human teeth. And so we have 4 different kinds of teeth for different kinds of food processing. Your front teeth, right here. 2, 1, 2 on either side, top and bottom. We have the same dental arcade, top and bottom, are your incisors. Incisors are the big, flat, blade-like teeth at the front of your mouth, the ones we call your front teeth. The incisors are cutting teeth. Their job is to shear through food. They're useful for both cutting through plant and animal material. They're good at both. We'll generally find that incisors in herbivores tend to be broader and flatter, whereas in carnivores they tend to be more cusped, more pointy and sharp. Now, immediately behind the incisors, you'll find the canines. Right here, little tiny cone-shaped teeth with a little point on them are the canines. You have a total of 4 canines, 2 upper, 2 lower, 1 in each quadrant of the jaw. That's the 1 in your dental formula. The canines are sharp cusped teeth that are tearing teeth. They are there to pierce into and tear flesh. And I say flesh specifically because canines are an exclusive feature of omnivores and carnivores. Herbivores do not have canines. An animal that is An obligate vegetarian is not going to have them at all. A canine is not a terribly useful tooth for plant processing, but it is an essential tooth for meat processing. So if you ever see a skull with canines, whatever species that is, you can bet that animal is an omnivore or a carnivore. So canines are exclusive to meat eaters, whether it's an obligate meat eater like a wolf or a cat, or whether it's an omnivore like ourselves. Now, you continue laterally there. Behind your canines, you will find two teeth called your premolars. The premolars, right here. Premolars have broad, rough, crenellated surfaces with lots of little lumps and bumps and creases in them. Your premolars are grinding teeth. They are primarily there to grind up tough plant matter. Tough plant fibers are going to be processed primarily by your premolars and molars. You will find immediately posterior to those are the molars. Molars look an awful lot like premolars. They're bigger, they're blockier, have more rugged surfaces. You have 3 molars in each quadrant of your mouth, 2 premolars, 3 molars. The molars are the crushing teeth. Grinding and crushing functions kind of overlap in premolars and molars, but the molars have the greatest forceful biting and crunching power. They're useful for crunching through shells around seeds and so forth. Think about it, if you're chomping on a seed or a nut, the back of your mouth is where you're going to want to bite down on it the most, because that's what those teeth are specialized for. So 2 incisors, 1 canine, 2 premolars, 3 molars. That is the standard human adult dental formula. By the way, if you are a strict herbivore, like a deer, you're going to find that your molars and premolars have much taller, higher cusps and much rougher grinding surfaces, because processing plant material is more important. You usually have larger numbers of those teeth as well. If you are a strict carnivore, like a wolf or a big cat, you will find that your premolars and molars have been modified for meat processing, and they have sharp points or cusps on them. We call those specialized premolars and molars carnassials, C-A-R-N-A-S-S-I-A-L-S, carnassials. You do not have carnassials because you're an omnivore. Now, a word about this. 32 teeth. That's the default dental formula for humans. We do not start that way, because humans get 2 sets of teeth during our lifetimes. We get 2 separate sets of teeth. Your initial teeth, the teeth that come into your mouth when you are young, are called your primary or deciduous teeth. D-E-C-I-D-U-O-U-S. The word deciduous means to fall like a leaf, because they fall out eventually, right? We often call them the baby teeth for short. These are the teeth that start erupting when you are young. You start getting them a couple of months into life. The rate of tooth eruption in children is actually pretty consistent throughout our species. Between the ages of 6 and 24 months, you're going to get almost all of your so-called baby teeth in. They will begin falling out anywhere between the ages of 5 and 11. Now, those primary or deciduous teeth, you don't have the same dental formula. You have fewer teeth when you're very young than you do when you are older. That your primary teeth, your dental formula is 2-1-2. So you have 2 incisors, 1 canine, 2 molars. You do not have premolars in little kids. So in other words, 5 teeth in each quadrant of the arcade, 10 top, 10 bottom. A full set of baby teeth is 20 baby teeth. Now they will gradually fall out till about the age of 12 is about the latest you're likely to hold on to them. And as they fall out, they are gradually replaced with your secondary teeth or your permanent teeth. Secondary teeth give the full dental formula, 2-1-2-3. They erupt throughout your adolescent years. You will have all of them erupted pretty much by the age of 13 or 14, with one exception. And that is your third molars. The backmost teeth in your dental arcade, the third molars, typically do not come in until your late 20s. For that reason, it is presumed that you know a few things about the world by that time, and therefore they have the name wisdom teeth. Now, many of you have a difficult relationship with your wisdom teeth. I'm sure many people watching this don't have them because their wisdom teeth came in at a weird angle or tried to erupt sideways or were crowding out other teeth or just didn't erupt in the first place. And a lot of us have had them surgically removed. The wisdom teeth in humans are vestigial teeth. We don't really need them anymore. They were much more necessary in our diets or in our ancestors' diets at a point in evolutionary history when we were processing a lot more raw plant fibers, a lot more raw nuts and seeds, and we needed that heavy grinding and crushing power. But since the advent of cookery, which actually predated Homo sapiens, it goes all the way back to Homo erectus, the third molar has been less and less necessary. It is a vestigial tooth. You don't need them. You can get by just fine without them. And like any vestigial organ, it's accumulated a lot of weird mutations over time, including a tendency to come in at a weird angle, or in some cases not erupt at all. Some people don't even have all of their molars. Some people just simply do not develop every one of their 4 premolars, and a significant percentage of us are never going to experience the eruption of all of them. So a lot of adult humans have only 28 maximum teeth, or sometimes 30 or 31 if not all of them erupted, or if some of them were able to come in and others were not. But the wisdom teeth are our last molars, the third molars, and you don't really need to have them. But if everything's going the way it should, they will gradually erupt throughout your late 20s. All right, so that would be our teeth. Taking a look around the oral cavity, we've got all the structures we need here to masticate our food, to chew it and to process it. But we have a few other things going on as well. We've got to mix in some digestive juices, and that is where a thing called salivation is going to come in. But you know what? I know this is a little bit short as my lessons normally go for this course, but I'm going to cut it off here because frankly I have a meeting I have to get to, online meeting at this point, but you know, it has to happen. So we're going to call it a day at this juncture. We'll next pick up by talking about your salivary glands and the process of mastication, and then move down into deeper parts of the digestive tract. Sound like a good plan? One last fun fact before I send you on your way. A lot of people call your canines your fang teeth. You can see why that is. They're little sharp pointy teeth like fangs. Here's the thing you might not realize. You don't have fangs. Neither does a wolf. Neither does a big cat. Tigers don't have fangs. Your cat doesn't have fangs. Your dog doesn't have fangs. They have big canines. A fang, by definition, is a specialized tooth for the delivery of venom. So snakes have fangs. Cats and wolves and tigers do not. And you don't either. So your canines, people call them their fang teeth, but that is not actually accurate because fangs are only there if they deliver venom. All right, so good point to leave off here. I will, one last fun bit of trivia. A small percentage of the population gets a third set of teeth. If you have a third set of teeth, they usually come in after the second set. Most of them are not going to be very good functional teeth. A lot of them come in at weird angles or are underdeveloped. Indeed, a lot of third sets of teeth remain locked in the jaw, in a sac within the jaw, and many times they have to be surgically removed. Some very few individuals get a complete third set of teeth in which their secondary teeth fall out and the third set of teeth replaces them. It's exceedingly unusual. The tendency for it tends to run in families, and it tends to cause a lot of dental problems. I count myself extremely lucky because I am the only man in my mother's side of the family in the last 3 generations who has not had a third set of teeth. But I had to have braces twice because my other teeth were coming in at all kinds of crazy angles, so there's that. All right, so I think that's a good spot to leave off. I will talk to you all soon. Hope you have a good afternoon.